Hey everybody, welcome to this Adobe Photoshop tutorial brought to you as always by tutvid.com. You saw the title of this video, right? Today we're going to take a look at creating this metallic rust gold metal texture. It really can be any kind of metal you want depending on what color we make it, but it's a really cool technique. I've only ever seen maybe like one or two tutorials on something similar to this in my life. So I think it'll be a cool technique, and I just pulled it out and was playing around with it a few days ago. It's going to be so cool. Now, if you enjoy this tutorial, of course, make sure you subscribe to my channel so you never miss another Photoshop or photography or graphic design related tutorial in the future. But also, you can pick up a copy of my course. It's all about, well, this is an advanced Photoshop course. You click on that little icon. It's a little circle with an eye up there in the top corner of the video, and you'll get a link to where you can check out the course. If you like it, pick up a copy. It helps support what we do here at tutvid.com. Helps me keep building the channel. We're moving into a new studio space very soon, which is going to be sick. And yeah, let's just jump in and check out this tutorial. So you can see here, this is what we got going on. This is one version of this metal, and this is totally from scratch. You don't need to download any textures or anything like that. We're going to make this entire thing here. So that's one way. Here we've got another version. You can see it's somewhat more, it's not quite as contrasty. Here's another version. We've got another version of it here. Something else here. And then last but not least, another kind of texture here. So literally every time you make this texture, it's going to be different. So if you just learn how to make one, you're going to be able to make any of them. And the more you kind of play around with it, the more you'll be able to build out and create more and more textures. And you can apply it to something like a 3D object. See, we got this little sphere here. And it's all wrapped in this nice golden, a golden sort of rust metal type texture here. Let me just go ahead and scale this, or not really scale it, but rotate it any which way. And we can see that it has that texture all over it. So maybe we'll throw that in as a bonus at the end of the tutorial, how to just quickly wrap a 3D object with the texture. But let's jump in and take a look at how to actually create the texture. So it all begins by going File, New, of course, and you can make the textures large or small as you want. I'm going with my favorite document size, my favorite square document size, that is, and that's 2048 by 2048. I'm going to choose Create here. Now, this whole thing begins over in the Channels panel, and right now I'm still in the 3D workspace, so I'm just going to come up here and go back to my original tutvid workspace, and there we go. We're back to order has been restored, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Over here in the Channels panel, and if you don't have Channels open, you can go Window, Channels right there. We want to go into our Channels panel, and we want to create a new channel just straight off the bat from scratch. So we're going to hit the New Channel button down here at the bottom of the Channels panel. There we go. You can see Alpha 1 has appeared. We can name this anything we want. You could just leave it named Alpha 1. I'm going to name it Metal 1, and you'll see why. Later on, we'll reference it when we create a little effect on this document. Now, here within the metal, we want to make sure our foreground and background color are white and black, which typically they will be if you're in a channel, but sometimes they might be a gray depending on what you're working on. White and black is what you want to work with here. And go Filter, Render, Clouds. So we want to just throw, it's a totally random pattern of clouds. You can use a hotkey Command or Control F to give you additional clouds. It'll just sort of re-render the clouds. If for some reason you don't like the first ones that appeared, that's great. And next we want to go Filter, Render, Difference Clouds. So it's kind of like right underneath clouds, just the difference clouds. You can see it gives us this almost like black lightning shooting through these clouds. And this, in all likelihood, you'll have to render a couple times before you get one you really like. So again, this is where Command or Control F really come in handy. I actually think I like that. What I'm looking for, and it's difficult to really see what you're looking for until you sort of create this metallic effect a few times. But what I'm looking for is lots of areas that are kind of low-lying, and then you have kind of these bumps, these bulbous areas that are sticking up out of it. And if we go back and look at our original metal, you can see how we kind of have a lot of sort of what appear to be flat areas of metal with this kind of crusting texture on top of it, all right? This is kind of where that pattern is going to come from. So you can see here we've got a good breakdown of that. I can hit Command or Control F again, but like this one, see, I don't like because too much of it goes right to the edges. So I'll just go Edit, Undo. It'll take me back to those different clouds that I really like. Next up, what we're going to do is bring up levels. So we're going to go Image, Adjustments, Levels, and there's not really a specific setting here in levels that you're looking to emulate. It's more or less you want to watch what you have. Remember, your difference clouds are going to be different than mine. So what I'm looking to do is make those black areas a little bit more black, kind of something like that. And I think I'm going to shift the midpoint, this middle gray point here, a little bit closer to the white to kind of darken the image overall a little bit as well. Something kind of like that will probably be great. I'm going to hit OK. And now here's a really, really cool trick and something that adds a lot to the final finished texture. We want to go Filter, noise, and add noise. Now, for an image that's 2048 by 2048, I find well, that's way too much. 2 to 3% in the noise department works. We can push this up to 3 if we're feeling risky. So 3% noise is good. Now, this is important. Distribution should be Gaussian, and monochromatic is going to always be ticked on because you're working here in an alpha channel. So that's great. We're going to go ahead and hit OK. All right, we have created our channel. Now, we need to somehow convert this channel to a very complex, very detailed texture, and this is where the magic happens. So let's come back up here to our RGB composite channel and just turn that channel back on, and we can shut our Metal 1 channel off. Get rid of, well, not get rid of it, but just hide it. And then you can see how Metal 1 is selected, right? That's the channel that's selected. We want to make sure we actually click on RGB to make sure that's selected, and then it selects your red, green, and blue channels. That's perfect. Go back to your layers panel. Now, well, actually, before we create this, I do want to remind you guys, as I pointed out in the open, make sure you check out the Advanced Photoshop course. It's the little circle with the eye in it. That's the icon you want to click and check out the course. Pick up a copy to support what we're doing here at TutVid. If you pick up a copy, thank you so much. If not, well, let's get back to the tutorial because this one's free, you know. All right, back to this. We want to go ahead and create a new layer. We can actually do it on the existing layer. Yeah, let's do it on the existing layer. Hold down your Alt or Option key and just double-click the background layer to unlock it, just like that. And we want to set a foreground and background color. Now, the foreground and background color you set, that's going to dictate kind of the color of your metal pattern initially. So if I go back in here and look, this Metal 5 has a very orange and brown color to it, but if I shut that off, this one has a very yellow, almost golden color to it. If you're not sure what colors to use, well, I'm going to give you a couple colors, but you can always jump out to something like Google Images and run a search for like rust or gold bullion bars or, you know, something like that, and find and just use the eyedropper tool, drag those images into Photoshop and sample like a highlight and a shadowy area of those images. You'll get two colors that'll probably work pretty well, and you can just, again, tweak and adjust and experiment and have a little bit of fun with it. So the colors that we're going to go with here are, I'm going to double click on my foreground color here. I'm going to set this to FBC E3D. So this is kind of like a brighter yellow. And then I'm going to flip foreground and background by hitting that little swappy swap arrow. And I'm going to select my color white here. And the white is going to be changed to 622 D01. Whoops, I'm trying to hit D0I. It's D01. So you see that 622 D01. And you can see basically what we have are, you know, a very dark yellowy orange color and a very bright yellowy orange color. So we're going to get kind of golden colored rust metal here in a moment. Now, obviously, we need to add something to this layer, and we're going to go and perform that clouds trick again. So we're going to go filter, render, clouds. Filter, render clouds. We don't need to worry about difference clouds. Just regular clouds are great. And you can see how the clouds are taking our foreground and background colors and using them. In fact, if I were to reset these to black and white, and I go filter, render clouds again, you can see it's black and white because the clouds filter is going to use whatever your foreground and background color are. So that's why I did that. I just hit the undo option there for undo. Well, we don't want to redo those clouds. That'll give us black and white clouds again. Undo, and we're back to our orange and yellowy clouds. Now, here's where the magic really happens. I'm going to name this layer metal or metal texture or whatever. I'm going to right click and I'm going to convert this to a smart object. This just is so we can get in and change this effect a little bit later on if we decide we want to. We'll probably be fine, but you know, better safe than sorry kind of thing. Let's go filter, render, lighting effects. So we're applying this lighting effects to a smart object. And right now we've got what looks kind of bad, quite frankly, because we're just blasting the living daylights out of this top corner of our image. Now we can move this spotlight around. And by the way, if you don't see this spotlight, you may have one of the other light types chosen. You may have one of the infinite lights, which is this, which this effect works with the infinite light as well. You can see here now we have the spotlight and the infinite light. I'm going to just hit the trash can to get rid of that infinite light. You may also have one of these lights here. I believe these are called omni lights, or just maybe they're just called, yeah, point light. So it used to be called an omni light, but now it's called the point light. So point light, we can get rid of that as well. We can just roll with one light here. One light is fine. I'm going to go with the spotlight. Now we can position this wherever we want by dragging the center around. I might actually zoom out by hitting Command minus, Control minus on the PC, and you can scale the width of your spotlight. You can scale the length of it, make it as big or small as you want, something like that. I'm just going to apply it so I get good coverage, all right? The highlight of my metal will be the top right corner of my image, but you can always rotate it around here. If you move the mouse enough, you can find rotate. There it is. And you can rotate and put this wherever you like. Again, I'm sticking with the top right corner. Now, here's where things get interesting. Over here in the lighting effects properties area, we want to go ahead and reduce the intensity to something like 25, all right? You can see there we're saving our highlights. Great. The hotspot, you can adjust the size of the hotspot if you want. Maybe we'll push that up a little bit. Maybe I'll push it up to like 40. That looks pretty good. The exposure here we do want to push up as well. I'll push it up to like, I don't know, 30, 35. 35 looks good. We're getting good crispness. Now notice we can change the color of the light as well. I'm not going to mess around with the color or colorize the exposure. I'm not going to touch either of those. Now here we want to increase gloss. We want to increase it to 100. We also want to increase metallic to 100. And then ambience, we're going to boost that just a little bit. This is just kind of like filling in some of that ambient light. So I'm going to go to like 5. Keep it kind of low. Now here's where the magic really happens. Under texture, we choose our Metal 1 channel. And this, by the way, is why I gave it a name. Really, if you have like 3 different textures and it's Alpha 1, Alpha 2, Alpha 3, you'll probably know what is what. But you can just see there, if we name our channel, it'll show up here. So I'm going to choose Metal 1. And look at what this does. So we can just zoom back in here and we can see immediately it's morphing this texture into our document. Now it looks kind of gritty and heavy and thick here. So maybe we want to increase our hotspot a little bit, or maybe we want to increase the intensity of our light a little bit. But you can just, you can tweak and adjust your settings as much as you want here. We can go ahead and hit the OK button up here, right? And just give it a second. It'll commit the lighting effect. You can see it renders it a little bit. And this is where if you decide you want to change it, because this is a smart object, you always can. So you can just go ahead and double click on lighting effects, come back in here and change things as you think they need to be changed. So we could do something like say, you know what? I love the color, but maybe, you see if we zoom in, maybe it just looks a little bit too gritty. See how gritty it is? The reason it looks that gritty is because we added 3% noise. Well, what if we just add 2% noise? Well, let's try that. Let's create a new channel here and create a totally new texture. So we're going to go filter, render, clouds, right? We've done this before. Filter, render, difference, clouds. And we'll get a totally different pattern here. So let's go with something like that. It looks good. Command or Control L to bring up levels. I'm going to boost the blacks just a little bit. And I don't think I'm going to mess with the midpoint too much. Maybe just a little bit. And I'm going to hit OK. And then we'll go filter, noise, add noise. And this time we'll add only 2% in the noise department. Go ahead and hit OK. Great. And I'll leave that named Alpha 1 just because we can. Now I'm going to go back to my composite RGB channel. And I'm going to go back to layers. And let's duplicate this layer. So I'm going to hit Command or Control J to duplicate the smart object, and I'm going to get rid of the, well, actually, no, I didn't have to get rid of the lighting effects. I can just double click on the word lighting effects, right? So this lighting effects here is the one we're working on. Double click on the word lighting effects. It's going to open up the lighting effects dialog box, and here from texture, I can now choose Alpha 1. And you can see it totally changes the way that my texture looks. I'll change the lighting. You see I can get the shadows on a different side of the metal. Maybe I'm creating this metal to match an image that I have, right? There we go, something like that. That looks cool. I can maybe decrease the hotspot a little bit, right? And boost the intensity to really give it more of a kind of specular nature. Go ahead and hit OK. And there we go. Well, give it a second to render. There we go. So there is our new, and there's the old metal texture. Now you can even take it a step further. So we can do things to this like add hue saturation adjustment layer, and we can overall change the color, right? Just by shifting the hue, we could do that. Maybe we don't want to shift the hue too much. Maybe just make it a little bit more orangey. We can boost the saturation or reduce the saturation, right? Anything like that. Maybe you want more like moon rocks, or like you're looking at a top-down photo of a zoomed-in part of a different planet or something. Really cool way to create texture for that. And then, of course, just lightness, which, lightness here in hue saturation is not usually a great idea to go switching that unless you're using the old colorize feature. So we could do that with hue saturation, right? Maybe I don't like that. We could also do something with color balance, right? So, we really need more red and yellow in this. And maybe in the shadows, we want to pump a little bit of blue and some red to just change the color of those. And the highlights, we want to give them like a crisp ring of yellow, right? Just like gong some yellow off those highlights. You can see there's before, there's after. Just kind of makes it a little bit more intense. So we can do something like that. You can also use a gradient map adjustment layer, right? So we go to gradient map. We could choose anything we want. Let's just go crazy with a blue. Number one, when the gradient map is inverted like this, you can see it almost looks like tin foil rolled out. If we hit the little reverse option here in our gradient map properties panel, now it looks a little bit more like the stone. And you can set the layer blend mode to something like soft light, and you're just changing the overall the way it looks. You could change it to something like color if you want to make it sort of bluish. All kinds of different things you can do when it comes to your gradient maps. A lot of really cool stuff that you can do. And you can just kind of play with it and see what you get. So that's really, really neat. Another thing that's really interesting and something you should definitely keep in mind is you can redouble these textures one upon another. So this is a smart object. What we can do is we can apply a second lighting effects right to this layer. So we got this single lighting effects. If we go filter, render, lighting effects, we can now apply a second lighting effect right on top of this. So I could say like, all right, yeah, I like my light kind of up there. I'm going to give it the metal texture here instead, and we're going to change the height. We're going to make it a little bit higher, right? And changing the height is going to change the way that the light and shadow play with your channel. With that, by channel, I mean, your texture channel here. And you could change stuff like, maybe make the intensity of the light more or less for this version of lighting effects. Go ahead and hit OK to apply that. And we can always check to see what it looks like before and after here by just shutting one of the lighting effects off or turning one of the lighting effects on. And if you really want to help them blend, you can even hit the little blending options icon right there, double click, and we can just set this to a blend mode here when we give it a second to show up. We could set it to a blend mode of something like, I don't know, soft light. We could try multiply. We could try all sorts of different things, and it'll really help blend the actual textures together. And you can see like this, if we go with something like this and we darken it and desaturate it a lot, we could start to make this look like, the stone wall of a cave or something. There's still way too much red in there. But we could really begin to desaturate this and make it look like, any type of rock, maybe convert it to the color gray. All sorts of stuff like that. So now that we've learned how to create this texture, we've in fact created two different types of the texture. You can see now this almost looks like an overhead view of like a battlefield in some video game, right? But now that we've done this, let's see how we can apply this to a 3D object. So let's just go ahead and create a quick 3D object. File, new, whatever. We'll go with, I don't know, 1920 by 1080, just a nice 1080p sized Photoshop document. We're going to go 3D, new mesh from layer, mesh preset, and choose sphere. So now we're going to get, you'll see a little ball. Photoshop's going to say you're about to jump into 3D workspace. Yep, fine, good. And there's our little ball. It's got a light in front of it, so it's difficult to see. But if we come over here to our 3D panel, and by the way, you might not have 3D optionality in your Photoshop, in your version of Photoshop. It all depends on whether or not you have, well, if you have Photoshop CC, you have it. But if your graphics card isn't good enough, you may not be able to mess around with 3D here in Photoshop. So we'll jump over here to the 3D panel, and right now we can only see lights because the light bulb is selected. Let's just make sure we can see everything here. And right here is my sphere. You can see it says sphere, and with the little drop-down arrow, there's sphere material. Right now, sphere material is this grayness that you see on the outside of the sphere. It's the texture that's applied to it. So if we select that sphere, we have this option to diffuse, and we've got this little icon next to it. If we select that little icon, we can choose new texture. And when we choose new texture, Photoshop's going to say, look, new document, great, 1920, 1080, great, hit OK. And now all we need to do, we'll go over, grab one of our textures. We can grab any of our textures here. Well, these are the ones that we didn't just create. Let's do one that we just created. So we'll grab this one right here that we just made, right, this guy. Drag it over to sphere material and drop it in the document. And we can either leave it the way it is, or we can use free transform to scale it down. And actually, I'm looking at it here, and this is kind of an interesting little dilemma. What's happening here is Lighting Effects does not have the same channels in this document, so we're not getting that texture. So let's get rid of this metal. Let's just drag this to the trash. Here's how we tackle this. We're just going to duplicate the smart object. I'm going to get rid of these three adjustment layers, by the way. They're just in the way. We're going to duplicate the smart object, Command or Control J, and then we'll right-click on it and choose Rasterize Layer. And now we can just drag this right over to the material, drop it in, and there we go. We have our material. And now I'm going to go Edit. Let's go Free Transform here. And I'm going to zoom out a little bit. And we can do any number of transforms that we want. We can maybe pinch this and crush it way up in like that. Maybe I'll leave some of it out. I'll transform more like this. Just kind of something like that. Hit the little check icon. We can zoom back in. And then all we need to do is close this document. So we'll go File, Close. And it's going to say, hey, would you like to save it? Yes. It is, note, it's a .psb file, not a PSD. So it's being saved on a sort of a different type of way than a normal PSD. So you can just hit OK, and it's going to save it. And if we go back to our 3D sphere, you can see it's been applied to the sphere, just like that. And we can look at any side of the sphere. So I can go into my 3D workspace, and let me just navigate the environment, actually navigate my camera, I'm sorry. And let's zoom any which way. Oh, whoops, we're just kind of scrolling here now. Let's just orbit the 3D camera here. And you can see we can just navigate all around our 3D object. And sure enough, yeah, we've got texture all over the place. And it's that stone texture that we just created. So you could see actually kind of a cool idea would be you could sort of make your own little planet Earth type thing. And you could make a three-dimensional planet Earth and apply that texture here in Photoshop. So that's really it. That's how you create this stony rock type texture in Photoshop. The important thing with this is because it's such a customizable effect, create lots of different types of channels. You know, maybe use levels, brighten one up a lot more than another, or add a lot more darkness into another one than another. Try different levels of noise, try different levels of depth there in your lighting effects dialog box. Try all sorts of different colors. Just the sky is figuratively the limit here when it comes to creating this effect. There's so much you can do with it. It's really crazy, but it's so cool. I mean, to be able to create texture that's that detailed and that realistic really quickly. You can do it in, 5 minutes. You can create texture. It's really, really cool to be able to do that. So if you guys have enjoyed this tutorial, again, make sure you subscribe to my channel so you never miss any of their Photoshop tutorials in the future. I would really hate for you to miss some great Photoshop tutorials. If you've really enjoyed the channel and the tutorial and everything, again, check out the course. I know I push it a lot, but it's one of the ways we keep things going here at tutvid.com. So if you're interested in that course, hit the little white circle with the eye on it and check out the course. Pick up a copy for yourself today or for a friend, something like that. That's always cool too. So for creating gold texture in Photoshop, and by the way, share it with me on Instagram. I've got my Instagram handle that's sliding out there. Share it with me on Instagram if you create something using this texture. I would love to see it. Love seeing what you guys create on Instagram. I like to get in there and comment and like and all that good stuff. So for creating this gold, metal, rust, you name it type texture in Photoshop, that's it. Get it, got it, good. Nathaniel Dodson, tutvid.com. I'll catch you in the next one.